Welcome to Dude Rakes, hosted by Marty Coleman. Each week, we'll do a deep dive into Clemson baseball with special guests knowledgeable about Clemson and/or college baseball. It's a casual, laid-back, but fast-paced 15 to 20-minute show. With that, let's get started.
Jason Priester, thanks for your time this afternoon. I know you got a busy day as always, but I appreciate 30 minutes or so of your time. We'll keep it short and try to keep it light, but Tigers are wearing it these days. They're 19-11, 2-7 in the ACC. They've lost 11 of their last 14, I think it is. Got run ruled twice, swept by Notre Dame. All this kind of started with that midweek loss to Georgia Southern. And, I'm not big for screaming about losing midweek games, but that's kind of where this negativity started for Clemson's year. Then they lost 2-3 to Notre Dame. 2-3 to Georgia Tech, swept at Notre Dame, as I mentioned, had a lead in the ninth inning in game 2 and lost that on a home run that tied the game and eventually lost it in extras. And then they blew a big lead against Coastal, of course, 2-3 against Miami, got crushed last night. With all that said, I know you were in Charlotte last night. Did you get any sense of the mood of this team that's struggling so much right now, where their head is at, knowing the schedule ahead, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes?
I'll say this. I got the sense that Eric Backett was pretty dejected last night, probably more so than I can recall seeing him. He got ejected in the second inning. You can argue whether that was to try to create a spark and light a fire or whatever, but, so he wasn't around for most of the game. Caught up with him for a minute afterwards, but, you could tell, by the tone in his voice. I think he's been caught a little off guard exactly how long this thing's lasted. I don't think he expected it. None of the buttons he's pushing, seem to work. They put Dillard in the leadoff spot last night, and I think he struck out 4 times, if I'm remembering right. And it's the only time Dillard's been in a leadoff spot all year. But, when you make that kind of move and put that guy there and he strikes out 4 times, that it sticks out. He's tinkered with the lineup throughout this whole thing, and just nothing's working, man. One base hit with runners in scoring position last night. At least on a positive note, you can say they didn't make any errors. But 2 of your best strike throwers can't find the zone.
Yes.
And Dylan Harrison and Ariston Vesey. So you have to use, 8, 9 pitchers to get through that thing. And just when it looks like you might be trying to mount a comeback, they just dropped the hammer. Had the big inning capped off with the grand slam there in the 6th. It's hard to tell, what the mood of the team is. That's a hard question to answer. Just not around them that much, at least not in that way. But he did seem a little dejected last night.
Well, I know what the mood of the fan base is. It's not positive. Yeah, and also last night, one of those arms they brought in is one we hadn't seen the entire season. So that's how, I don't know, kind of out of sorts it was last night. They've used 18 pitchers up to before last night. They had used 18, just the same 18, some more than others, but the 18 had been the 18 for several weeks now. And then all of a sudden I see somebody out there. I'm like, well, who's this guy? And I texted you to ask you who he was. So it seemed like they were reaching for anything. And as you said, anyone that could throw strikes. The pitching, last night aside, the pitching has still been pretty decent. Now, they've regressed since we've been in the ACC play, of course. And I think that was really expected, right? The ACC batters are better than some of those teams in the pre-ACC. But here we are on April 2nd. Aiden Canuck doesn't have a win, but he's got a 4.72 ERA. Sharman's been good, and Tipsworth has been competitive, I guess, on Sundays would be a good way to say it. but they're just really. It feels like they're hurting overall in the starting pitching department. And now we're seeing some cracks on the back end with Danny Nelson giving up a blast last night. And as I said, he gave up the home run at Notre Dame that tied that game that they eventually lost. They're throwing a lot more balls than they were earlier. Your sense of the pitching staff, just in general, we talked about Harrison and VC not throwing strikes last night. I talked about just kind of in general, everybody not throwing strikes like they were. What's going on with the pitching staff in your estimation?
That's a little head scratching to me. You see those guys, with such a high strike rate, for so long, and then all of a sudden it just seems like everybody falls off the wagon there. It's not like these guys just forgot to throw how to throw strikes. I mean, geez, that's one of the most basic concepts there is. And Harrison and VC, those are two guys that have been throwing strikes up to last night. Golly, I think VC's ERA might have been, God, what was it? Was it 0.0 coming into last night?
Might have been, yeah. I know his opponent's batting average is right around 100, maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, the pitching's just not been good enough from top to bottom. It kind of is what it is. I think Connaught, we know he got knocked around versus Georgia Tech, had to bat in it against South Carolina. I'm having a hard time remembering what he did against Miami. Was it 4-0 when he left or 3-0 when he left? Seemed like they were in it when he left, but nobody that they don't. I don't think they've scored any runs when he's been on the mound on a Friday, since or for like 4 out of 5 weeks or something like that. Going back to South Carolina every week except LaSalle. I know they scored some runs against Miami after he came out. I mean, why he's in the game.
Right.
That kind of, shrinks your margin for error and just amps up the pressure knowing, hey, man, I got to be perfect, man. They're not scoring any runs when I'm out here. Sharman's kind of been who, over the past couple of weeks, minus what happened against Notre Dame, he's kind of been who I kind of envisioned him being. He was pitching a little bit above his weight in the non-conference. Right. He's kind of come back down to earth a little bit since ACC play started. Talon Bell is the one that's really, not delivered this year. Backus talked about him having a lot of bad luck, a couple of weeks ago, or I think it was after the Sunday Miami game, or the Saturday Miami game. It was a Saturday. Game 3 was on a Saturday that time, but they've not gotten out of him what they were expecting this year, and it makes you have to take Titsworth out of the bullpen, where I think he's probably better suited to be.
Agreed.
And then you got guys like Danny Nelson, who I think he's had 3 pretty bad outings in a row now, and it started with that blown save at Notre Dame. I know there was I think that was the day they had some controversy at the end of that game, but he still gave it up. The pitch is it just hasn't been where it needs to be. And to me, the biggest head scratcher is some of these guys that were, pounding the strike zone. They just can't find it right now for whatever reason.
Speaking of the pitching staff, Joey Tyler has a question here, and I think it's one that's been circulating quite a bit among the fans. I saw Clark commented on it last night online, and for the longest time, I agreed with Clark. I was like, the pitching's not the problem. They're scoring less runs. They're still not hitting a whole bunch of home runs. They're not getting many extra base hits at all. But the pitching has been pretty good overall. Now, again, they've regressed since they hit ACC play, and you can say it was the competition. Sure, but the competition is not why Danny Nelson was throwing 98. I mean, anyway, do you think we need to look at a new pitching staff? Comment as you wish too, JP.
I mean, I don't. I have been one of those that have been wondering why Dylan Harrison doesn't get more, hadn't gotten a look on the weekend, because he had been up until last night. He had been so good. And then last night he comes out, walks the first guy, hits the second guy, and before you know it, 3 runs have scored. He doesn't even make it out of the first. Look, every pitcher's going to have a bad day. Maybe that was his. He's not had one before that all season. So I'm not going to ding him too hard for a bad outing. I think that's going to happen to anybody.
Right.
Um, I've never been a big fan of Titsworth starting. I'd much rather him come out of the bullpen. Maybe Harrison's a guy you could look at as a Sunday starter. That way you get Titsworth back in the pen. I don't know. I don't know. There's a whole lot of. I just don't know. There's a whole lot you can do with the pitching staff right now. You got who you got. I certainly think Sharman and Canuck are two of your better guys that probably need to be starting. You can make the argument that they could be flip flopped. But you got who you got at this point. I see a lot of griping online about Jimmy Bellinger and needing a new pitching coach. I ain't ready to go there yet. I just don't know that they've got the talent, from top to bottom when you compare it to some of the other teams they're trying to compete against in the ACC.
Makes perfect sense. I tend to agree with you, and I agree with the take on Harrison. I wondered the same thing. I didn't put it out there anyway. That's just not, I rarely speculate anything on X. But that was my thought too. This guy's giving you everything. He's throwing strikes. He was at 69% before yesterday. 69% strikes. I think that was only the second only to Sharman on the team. And VC was 0-0 before yesterday, by the way. And he had, as you mentioned, he had thrown strikes lately too. Just didn't happen. I tend to agree. I think I will say this. I think they have more talent than they've had in recent years. So
I do too.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, that's where I understand people asking that question, because they appear to have more talent and they're better, but how much better? And it doesn't appear they're enough better or more, enough better to make a big difference. I'm tripping over my words, trying not to say anything. Then there's another side to this. The injury to Jerem Purify takes out their leadoff hitter, and you were talking about having to put Jay Dillard up there or Jack Crichton, who's got a great average, but there's a lot of singles in there. Savoy's cooled off a little bit. Gaffney has shown very little power, and Ty Dowley, we talked about this last time you were on a couple of weeks ago. He's hitting 236. He's got just the 2 home runs and 17 RBI, but even more than that, he's got 4 extra base hits in 106 at bats. He's got 2 homers and 2 doubles, and that's just about it.
That, to me, that's kind of a microcosm of the entire offense, man. It's just a bunch of singles. They don't slug enough. There's not they are not hitting the long ball at a pace I thought they would this year, because you assume you're going to get at a minimum 10 out of Dally, right? Minimum. That guy's hitting 19, 20 home runs a year there at Mercer. I get it. It's a step down, but he has shown that he's got the power. It's just not translated to this season. You thought you'd see an increase with Gaffney. You're getting what you expected power number-wise out of Savoy and Gerald. Probably a little bit more than you thought you'd get out of McClatty. But outside of that, they're just not hitting a lot of homers. They're not hitting a lot of doubles. I don't think they've got but 1 or 2 triples all year long. Slugging percentage is not where I thought it would be with this team at this point. And losing Purify absolutely hurts, because you don't really have another prototypical leadoff guy. Tried Crichton there, but I don't know. I don't know that that's where he's better suited at, or better suited to be in the lineup. I think he's better suited to be a little further down. They seem to be reluctant to try McClatty in the leadoff spot. He's been one of their better run producers. I can understand why. Maybe that's something they'll end up looking at. I don't know, but what we saw from Dillard last night certainly wasn't the answer. And, I hate to say it, because he's a good kid. He's been loyal. He stuck around. He hadn't transferred out, and he was on a tear there for a couple of weeks. He's just, cooled way off since. And he doesn't give you the speed that a Purify or a McClatty does there at the top of the lineup. It's just a mess right now, and you're not going to get Purify back, probably for another month, at least to be. Maybe you see him pinch run a little bit, but
Right.
how often could he realistically do that? But I don't think you see him back in the field for probably another month, maybe. It's they and it's not like they've got a bunch of dudes on the bench that you could
Well,
just slide
yep.
in and out. I got into it with somebody on Facebook yesterday because I knew it was some troll who never watches the games, and he kept saying, take out the guys that aren't performing. And so I kept asking him, replace them with who? And he
Yeah.
would never answer me.
Yeah.
I knew he wouldn't, but who you going to replace them with? I mean, they're Jackson. Jackson Moore. Yeah. I mean, he started a couple games this year, hasn't played much. I don't know that there are any other really realistic options right now of guys that are truly ready to play at this level.
Yeah, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. That back at said preseason he had 12 bats, and 9 of them are in the lineup every day. And we went to we came up with 11. We figured out who the 12th was. Yesterday's starting pitcher, but who hasn't batted this year. So you're going to stick a guy like that in there now, in the middle of the season. And what about Claiborne seems to have come on a little bit. He's doing much better. What about putting him up there? Doesn't he have speed?
You know what? I don't even know why I didn't think of that, because I was thinking about that before I even jumped on here with you. I was thinking that to myself, that he'd probably that the way he's hitting since he's been back into the lineup. He sat for a little while. He was struggling mightily at the plate. Yeah, that dude's got elite speed. I saw him go from first to third against Miami last weekend, and you're like, wow, he can fly, man. So yeah, he's definitely got the speed. That to me, that's a realistic option right there.
Be interesting to see moving forward. You touched on this earlier, but the defense is horrendous. Now, earlier in the season, we talked, and Bakich, defended, explained away some of the issues, or attempted to. I don't think he explained them away from you, and as the season's played out, we've seen you're more correct than not. I checked today. It looks like the NCAA website's updated. They have 30 games for Clemson, and they are 242nd of 300 in fielding percentage. That's not everything, but also you can just look at the way they play sometimes and go, even when they don't make errors, they're doing the wrong things and running into each other and whatever else is going on out there. It's just not smooth on the defensive end for this team.
They have given up 144 runs this year, right? I had it right here. Oh,
yes, 144.
Yeah,
144. 28 unearned runs.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I had the number right here and I couldn't find it. Yeah, 28 unearned runs.
One a game, basically.
Yeah, and they've made 40 errors. They didn't. I think the defense has been a little bit better over the past week or so. It's not been nearly as bad as it was prior to that. They didn't make any errors last night. I thought they fielded pretty cleanly for the most part. It certainly isn't what cost them the game yesterday. I just think you've got some guys that are playing out of their natural positions. McClatty was a shortstop coming out of high school. He's proven to be pretty versatile. I just don't know that he's the strongest fielder at certain spots. He's probably better in center than he is at third. I don't think Dillard's the strongest defender. I think Lichtenberger has some range, but I think he's got an average arm. Gaffney's been up and down at first. He started out so strong at first last year over the first half of the season. His defense seemed, from what I can remember, was great. And then, he went into that little spiel and wasn't hitting well, wasn't fielding well. And he's made a lot of great picks over there this year, but last time I looked, he was tied for the team lead in errors too. So he's had some mistakes over there too. And then you got, you watch that game last night and you see Savoy's playing way in on a ball that gets over him. Same thing with Clavon in center field. And I'm sure I know the guy that hit the ball in center field has not hit for power this year. So I'm sure that's why they were playing in. I can't remember who hit the one in left. It's probably the same thing. It's just, whatever. It goes back to what I said earlier about whatever buttons he's pushing, they're just not working. You bring those guys in on guys that aren't hitting home runs, then all of a sudden they belt one over your head. I think both of them went for triples, if I remember. I know one of them did. I know Wake had a couple of triples last night, if I remember. I think both of those things went for triples. It was at least a double and a triple. But
I remember 2 triples last night.
Yeah, it just whatever he tries to do, it's just not working. And I've heard him talk about that a couple of times now. When you're going through it, it's just, especially the deeper you get into it, it's harder to get out of it. And they're pretty deep into it right now.
Yeah, they got Stanford coming up for a 3-game set, and I was thinking, well, here's a chance, or not coming in. They're going to Stanford for a 3-game set. Here's a chance to get away from the expectations and playing at home and all that's worth. And Stanford has been so, but then I read Stanford had won their first ACC series last weekend, so maybe they're turning a corner. And you got to go to Stanford, and then you play Santa Clara on Monday. Okay, so I would think turn this thing around. They're going to need. I hate to put numbers on it, but they're going to need to win like 3 out of 4 of these. Maybe win this Stanford series and then beat Santa Clara. But hey, next week North Carolina comes calling, and the weekend after that you go to Virginia, and the weekend after that Louisville. You go to Louisville. Then it's Boston College, JP, who's a terrible matchup, it would seem, for this Clemson team, because they play small ball and they run and they put pressure on the defense.
And they're pretty good.
Yeah. And guess what? Then Coastal. You go to Coastal after that. So, and then Florida State. So this team really needs 3 out of 4 this weekend, I think, to get back in it. 2 out of 3 against Stanford and maybe beat Santa Clara, who I know nothing about.
Yeah, we're talking about 4 games in 4 days, really 5 games in 6 days.
Right.
And you just tore through a lot of that bullpen last night, so a lot of those guys probably won't even be available tomorrow. I'm with you. You got to win the Stanford series, or you might be starting to throw some dirt on this team. I think they are in, people talk, going into ACC play, we're talking about this team hosting. Now we're sitting here today. I'm not sure they're making the tournament, man, the way they're playing. One of my colleagues keeps saying maybe they'll be a dangerous 3-4 seed. Man, I wouldn't even bank on them getting in at this point. It just seems like the more the losses pile up, it kind of feels like guys are starting to press a little bit, and when you start to press, it goes sideways. I wouldn't be surprised at all if some of those pitchers, if that's part of the problem, they've started to press a little bit. But if you don't take 2 out of 3 from Stanford this weekend, I mean it's game over, man. As far as any possibility of playing home baseball at Clemson, you might get on a little bit of a streak and sneak into the tournament. But if you want to play home baseball at Clemson in the postseason, it's got to start now. And this is kind of when they did it in Bakic's first season. They were 2-7, and then they just went on that tear and ended up being 2-7 in league play and went on that tear. I think they were 16-13 overall. Did the hidden ball trick in or against Florida State. I think it was in Tallahassee that season, and that's kind of what propelled it. They ended up being the 4 seed. But, that team had guys like Cam Canarella and Blake Wright. I just don't see that dude on this team, man. That's another thing. I just don't know that they got the veteran leadership that some of his past teams have had, like a Listy last year, somebody that everybody respects and he can light a fire under you. I just don't know that they got that guy with that personality this year. But if you go out west this weekend and drop 2 out of 3 or get swept, it's time to start shoveling the dirt.
Yeah, that's why I listed out that schedule. I too was thinking about, it's baseball. You can go on a run. This is not football, where you pretty much know for the most part who's going to win and lose the games, at a more confident level than you do in baseball. Anybody can go out there and throw a shutout or hit 2 home runs or whatever. We've seen it before. We've seen backage teams do it before. But that schedule kind of makes you wonder. Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder if that's possible, as you said, with this team being a little different. No firebrand out there, like you said, Dom Listy or Cam Canarella or those guys. Maybe purifies that guy if he ever comes back. Who knows? But I think when I played the schedule out in my head, which is a horribly, terrible, dangerous thing to do, it never works out the way you think it is. I was looking at okay, they 29, 30 wins. That's not getting them in the regional. They're going to have to win some games that they're not expected to win now. And you think about how close this team was. They are, 9th inning lead at Notre Dame in game 2, 9-3 lead against Coastal. That would have been 2 good wins to add to their resume. And they didn't even split them. They lost both of them, which is, a really, really tough thing to deal with at this point in the season.
Yeah, they finding different ways to lose. If you find a way to finish off both those games, man, maybe we're having a different conversation right now.
Right.
Because baseball, as me and you both know, man, a lot of the time it's a game of momentum. If you start to build some, you can keep it going. This team's just got the wrong kind of momentum going for it right now, and it's like that snowball is rolling downhill, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and the bigger it gets, the harder it's going to be to stop it.
Well, I mean, just think about this. Let's just say, though, they win those 2 games. Nothing else. They still lose the series to Notre Dame. They still lose the series to Miami. They'd be 21-9. They'd have another 3-6 in the ACC. Not great, but not 2-7. It just sounds, worse. It sounds a heck of a lot worse. That would have, and again, just the committee looking at a team saying, hey, they beat a good Notre Dame team on the road, and they beat a good Coastal team. It's just the whole conversation has shifted, not because of those 2 losses, but I mean, that's a large part of it. You blow leads, you get national attention, and not the right kind of national attention. Well, I know you're busy, JP. I know you got another show to do, so I sincerely appreciate you jumping on short notice. I'm sorry we had to have such a I was thinking about that today, how we were so fired up when the season began. Of course, we are every baseball season. We love baseball, but we're so fired up when the season began. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to sit back and see what happens this weekend and go from there. But it has been a tough couple of weeks for Clemson baseball. Jason Priest here, the Clemson Insider. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks probably if you have the time.
Always got the time for you, my friend.
All right. Appreciate you, JP.
Yes, sir.